Hello everyone. Well, it's really exciting to be here with Danny in person today, now that the COVID restrictions have eased. And just before we begin to talk about WCS annual report, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to acknowledge that wherever we are today, we are meeting on Aboriginal land, always was and always will be. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm enormously privileged to live, work and raise my children on Gadigal land, and I commit WCS to walking alongside Aboriginal people in the spirit of reconciliation. And let's talk annual report.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me in person. I feel really honoured. And congratulations on your amazing OAM. I feel really privileged. You know, with a courtesy or bow when I welcomed you in today.
I'll have to do that probably in September when I visit the governor.
Oh, so, that's beautiful. We're really proud of you, Annabelle, and we're incredibly proud of the work that WCS does. The 2020 annual report beautifully highlights that, how diverse the work is that the team's been doing, and also I think some of the incredible milestones that you've achieved this year. It's been a frantic one, and there's been a lot of growth. So I thought one of the things that we might do is actually do a bit of share screen, and I'm going to pull up a few pages from the report and just talk them through with you. Is that all right?
Excellent.
Let's do that. Okay, so I'm sharing screen. I always feel very excited when I get this right, which I think I'm just about to do. Look at me go.
You go, girl.
All right, and now I'm just going to get rid of that little icon. Aha. And we should be away. And we are away.
Excellent.
Okay, wonderful. So it was clear to me looking at the network timeline that your social franchise model has experienced significant growth. Since 2018, we've had 3 new shelters open and there are 2 more in development. There's also been a number of transitional houses open, including Beecroft House, which I'd really like to speak to you more about in just a moment. But for now, Annabelle, can you share with us a little about why you think the network has experienced such growth?
I think it's experienced growth because this is a model that's really resonated with people. And I think partly that is because, you know, around 2014, 2015, there was a huge growth in awareness around domestic and family violence. And a lot of that was driven, you know, sadly by some really terrible cases like Rosie Batty and the loss of her son Luke in really devastating circumstances. And I think what that really did was, and her advocacy work along with that of David Morrison the following year, was to really kick off a national conversation about domestic and family violence. And it had been the case for many years beforehand that there hadn't been enough beds for women and kids who needed them. You know, when I was working in the sector as a shelter manager at Elsie in 2011, one of the things that really resonated with me was that, you know, for every bed that we had available, there were 3 women and kids who were really desperate for it, and having to turn people away was enormously hard. And that had gone on for a while. And I think for me, when I was working with WCS, there was that real, in the early days, there was that real awakening of awareness around this and communities saying, well, what can we do? You know, how can we work to solve this problem? And so being able to come to communities with a solution that says, we'll walk alongside you and help project manage this. We understand all of the legals of how to set it all up. We understand how to run a shelter on a day-to-day basis, and we'll help you pull the funding together to do it. Is a pretty complete package to offer a community that wants to do something. So I think, you know, it is the funding, it's the local community solution, and it's engaging people around a very obvious need. I think that's been pretty powerful.
Yeah. So are you in a situation now where you're getting calls and you're being contacted by communities asking you to come in and help them with this?
Yeah, we have. And I think the tide for us really turned in about 2016 when we had our 4th shelter open, the Sanctuary in the Hills, which you were a part of. And you know, it's got to the point these days where we receive reach outs really regularly from communities, not just in New South Wales, but all over Australia, saying, wow, could you help us set up a shelter here? You know, we had an inquiry from South Australia yesterday. And I think that's also the power of a community-driven model that works from the grassroots up, is that you don't have to take a top-down approach where you empower communities to solve problems. Then this is something that could really go everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you made that point about communities, because it really does take a community to raise a shelter. And one of the things that I really enjoyed in the annual report was looking at the way it is structured, your network is structured. It's very clear that you rely on community support. These places are embedded within community. Can you talk us a little bit about what opportunity that then brings to the community, brings to the people that are concerned?
Yeah, and I think that was really the surprise for me. I think in the first couple of years of doing this, I thought what we were doing was setting up much needed crisis beds, creating more of them. But what became really apparent very quickly was that the community capacity building elements of it was so incredibly important. And that was stuff around, where we'd get the reach outs from the Rotary clubs or the schools or the local preschool or the neighbourhood centre that wanted to know more about what we did, wanted to understand more about domestic violence and women's homelessness. And so what we were doing was not just starting the project of the shelter, but really educating a whole community and taking them on a journey to understand what the drivers were for this and how everybody could do something to solve it. Because everybody can contribute, and that's from the smallest thing. It's from, like the florist who donates the flowers that sit on the table at the sanctuary for the first day that's open, or, it's the local baker who says, well, at the end of each day, you can have the bread from my business, for nothing for the women and kids. Or it's, or if it's the local business in the business park up the road that says, we're making a commitment to supply all of the toilet paper, tissues and cleaning products, and we'll just do that. And I think because there is a way that you can use everybody's skills or talent or resources to make a difference, you actually use that as the entry opportunity to get people involved. And people want to be involved. It's like a damn wall breaking down when you invite people in to solve the problem.
Look, in my work as an educator, I'm always really keen to look at how we can contribute to individual wellbeing. And the keys to wellbeing really are connection, altruism and agency. And I think what this network model does is provide a community with an opportunity to connect, to be altruistic in a meaningful, visible way, and also to have a sense of agency and control over an issue that can feel so overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And we can feel so powerless against. I remember the first community meeting here in Castle Hill, because I also work in media, was reading reports and writing reports about women who had died at the hands of their partner and feeling really overwhelmed with grief about that and feeling quite powerless. And I remember reading that you were holding a forum at Castle Hill and going to that forum hoping that it might give me a sense of hope and purpose, and it absolutely did. But then, you can channel that grief and that despair into something so concrete and positive. And I think perhaps that's what's been a little contagious for people, do you think?
Absolutely. I think, it really is. One of the things is that, this is an issue, women's homelessness, domestic violence, around which there's been a heck of a lot of talk. Politicians talk a lot about it. They say, this is unacceptable, it can't stop, it can't continue, we have to stop it. And then what? What is the solution to that? And I think when you take this enormously challenging social issue and you channel it down to the local level and you explain to people, this is how you can make a difference with what you've got, and this is how you can make a difference, and this is how you can change things. It's exactly to your point around agency. It takes it from the unsolvable to the concrete, where you can make a difference, and in a positive way. I think one of the things that I've really seen throughout the entirety of this model is, this enormous goodwill that exists within communities wanting to solve issues, wanting to make a difference, on an equal level to people. It's not about charity. It's not about looking down on people. It's not about helping the poor or anything like that. It is about, we care about you and we want to support you, and also to a bigger life and a safer future.
And also, I think feelings of better for the grace of God go any of us.
Exactly.
I mean, particularly at the moment in our current changing, tumultuous economic climate, many of us are only a few paychecks away from feeling quite despairing about accommodation, about having a safe place to call home. And surely that should be a given, that we can all feel that we have a safe place to call home. But we've talked a lot about community and the impact. The impact is
I just love it so much.
I know, I do too. But I also want to get to some of the other magic that your model brings. And that isn't just the community, it's what actually happens within the shelters themselves. and the incredible team of frontline workers that you have who are in there, you know, holding hands, making cup of teas, having these important life-changing conversations. And I think, to me, that is so significant, because often you hear, you know, government talk about funding hotel rooms, and I mean, those sort of stopgap measures may have a place in crisis accommodation, but this is so much more than that. So can you talk us through what some of the caseworkers would do with a woman? You know, what would that look like and feel like? What might be some of the actions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what that is it's the critical middle component to the three elements of success. Firstly is you need the safe roof, so you need housing. Secondly, you need the professional support. And thirdly, you need the social inclusion, which is the community piece that we've just talked about. And to me, it's those three ingredients that are actually kind of the magic in what we do. And if we're talking about what the shelter managers do and what the caseworkers do, what we're talking about is professional expertise. You know, these are people who understand women's homelessness and domestic and family violence back to front.
It can be complex, can't it?
It can be incredibly complex, and every situation is very individual. You know, you will need to do a risk assessment in every case to determine, you know, the level of risk that this person's at, whether it's safe to be in the shelter, whether we need to move them, what's the best form of accommodation for them. It's also around, you know, really so much of the time that they spend professionally is about navigating various systems, because when a woman is experiencing abuse or leaves a relationship, you just drop straight into this complex network of systems that if you've never navigated that before, it can be really overwhelming. And particularly if English might not be your first language.
Or you're suffering trauma.
Exactly, or you're suffering trauma, or your kids are traumatised. So, you know, it's about navigating legal systems, so police and justice for AVOs or court appearances. It's about negotiating with the children's school, whether it's safe to stay there, whether they need to move, whether, you know, there needs to be advocacy around that. It's around referrals to doctors, to lawyers. There may be immigration involved. There may be family law matters. There is a host of systems that surrounds a woman in these circumstances, and the professional support to navigate those systems, as well as help them find affordable housing at the end of the period, is actually incredibly important. And that's in addition to this really extraordinary skill that most of our, you know, well, that all of our shelter managers and caseworkers have, which is knowing how to take somebody's emotional temperature. You know, seeing where they're at every day. Do they need a push? Do they need more support? Do they need a bit of help? Do they just need to be left alone for a little bit? How are they going? And supporting a woman through that trauma journey and that crisis journey is incredibly important from that perspective as well. You know, it's like some days you can sit down with somebody and work through, right, we're going to do the housing, we're going to do Centrelink, we're going to do all these things. And, you know, and on some days, someone might be fine to do that. And on the next day, it's kind of like, okay, today's not going to be the day. Let's just surround you with a bit of love and care and a bit of something else to think about. And there's a lot of professional judgment in that, which is what our shelter managers and caseworkers are just absolutely excellent at.
Yeah. How long would the women and children often stay with us, Annabelle?
About 2 to 3 months, just depending on the complexity of their issue and you know, and the personal networks that they have to fall back on. For example, if somebody has family or friends that she can stay with, or access to resources, her crisis might actually be a shorter period of time. So, you know, it might only be a matter of weeks that they stay with us. But if someone has, you know, really complex family law or immigration issues, it can be a number of months. But our basic principle is we don't exit people into homelessness, because what would be the point? You know, we provide each individual woman and her children, if she has them, with the support that they need.
And speaking of the women and children you've supported, I mean, these numbers are just astonishing. 370 individuals accommodated, 20,211 bed nights provided for the sector. Above and beyond that, you know, you've also looked at some outreach work, 318 women and children supported in outreach. What does that mean, by the way, when we talk about outreach in this context?
Those numbers just, honestly, they just make my heart just burst with pride, because I think, you know, when I look at this, I'm just so grateful for the communities that have walked alongside us, and for, you know, for our professional staff in shelters, because, you know, those beds and that support weren't there for women 5 years ago. You know, this is lives forever changed because of what we collectively have been able to do. And so what the outreach program actually is so we know that the crisis period is around 2 to 3 months, and what's really important is supporting that woman and her family into affordable housing. And it's such a huge challenge, in Sydney, very unaffordable. But we pull off miracles every single day. And we've actually broadened our partnerships and our housing pathways so that we're making meanwhile use of properties such as those with PACE Foundation, Pathways Home, with other partners, Evolve Housing, with partners like Link Housing at Beecroft House, which is an amazing project. And what outreach support is it's a continuation of those relationships that have been built in the shelter that are provided through ongoing check-ins and assistance by a professional caseworker, because we know that the journey from domestic violence or trauma can actually be like 3, 4, 5 years. And so what we want to do is make sure that when women exit the shelters, we set them up in the best way possible for the future, and that involves providing continuing support.
The feedback from the women we've supported, I mean, those statistics are just incredible. The women that have been within our shelters obviously have felt listened to, they felt supported, they felt cared for, and they've been offered that really vital practical support that you've touched on. The numbers are one thing, and they're incredibly impressive, and the whole team should be, just so proud. But I think sometimes it takes personal narrative to really engage our hearts as well. I'll just take my phone off the hook, sorry. Would you be able to talk us perhaps through a bit of a case study?
Yeah, look, one of the ones that really resonated with me was a woman who came to the shelter, and she had like absolutely nothing. She had like a plastic shopping bag with, sort of a few notes in there and a couple of kids' needs. And she had a 5-year-old girl and a baby boy. And she had effectively been kept as a prisoner, locked in a room, locked inside her house, by her partner. She wasn't really familiar with Australia's systems or, what was legal and what wasn't. And, she didn't even realise that domestic violence was illegal in Australia. And so, when she came to the shelter, we showed her room. She started to cry because it was so beautiful. There was a bag on the bed and the handbag, which had a whole bunch of, really nice things in there. And she came running out to the staff and said, "Oh, somebody's left their bag behind." And they said, "Oh no, this is for you. Like this is," and she's like, "Oh, I've never had one before. My husband wouldn't let me have one. This is for me." And and her daughter started at the nearby public school about a week and a half later, and she went to school in a brand new uniform with a backpack and a lunchbox, and she's like, "Oh, do you mean I get to keep these?" And it's like, "Yeah, you do." And the child support worker, who's another specialist worker that we have in our family shelters, incredibly important to see the kids as needing support in their own right, as well as in relation to their mums. And mum said, "Oh, thank you so much for holding and talking to my baby, because no one's ever really paid him much attention before." And he was really thin because she'd had to put him on cow's milk early because a partner hadn't allowed her to buy the proper formula for him. And so, obviously all of that baby's needs were met, that mother's needs were met, and we were able to support her, fairly quickly afterwards, considering, into her own house and into her own future, and connecting the girl up with school, connecting mum up with employment opportunities. This is somebody whose world just became a whole lot bigger because of the support that we were able to provide.
And his children's world
just
became a whole lot bigger.
And what they've had is the opportunity to be in a home where there are safe adults, where there's a different way to live, where there is support and love and encouragement around them, and to have that modelled and realise that that is the world that they should be living in is incredibly powerful.
Extraordinary. It must be very rewarding and moving for our wonderful frontline workers as well, to share that journey and to partner women in that journey. I know you at WCS spend a lot of time and a lot of energy supporting our frontline workers. Can you just talk us through some of the support you offer? Because that must be vital in terms of debriefing and making sure that their oxygen masks are on so that they can support others.
Yeah, and look, and I think that's really important. And I did when I was a shelter manager, we didn't really have that kind of network. And now that we're in a position where we can provide that, again, it just fills my heart up, because what the hub seeks to do is just really back in the shelter managers and staff with the best practice policies and procedures, to give them all the tools that they need to do the job, to be there as that peer-to-peer, ear and debriefing if necessary. And that's also backed in with a whole lot of professional practice stuff as well. We have a shelter managers forum that happens every couple of weeks at the moment. We've been doing that by Zoom during the COVID period, which has been so great, and I've really enjoyed being a part of that. There's also caseworker training. Someone from the hub might go out to the shelters and do training on specific issues such as the computer system. And we also bring our boards in for things like governance training or media training. We've just actually kicked off the intranet, and we're putting a lot of resources on there. So we're just always looking for ways that we can better support the frontline staff and the local shelter boards as well. That's what we're here for. We're here to be that kind of, that sustainability and reliable piece. So if people need something, they can come to us and we'll help.
Now, looking at the reasons why women may be referred to you is really interesting. 73%, or almost three-quarters, as a result of domestic and family violence. During this unusual time of pandemic, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that domestic and family violence will be on the increase. Have we seen that in our network? And do you think now that we're venturing back into the world, there might actually be a bit of a second wave of women who now have the opportunity to reach out, to connect, to visit and to ask for support where perhaps they've been socially isolated and haven't been able to access the services? Yeah,
it's been a really interesting time. And there's been a lot of policy settings at the state and federal levels, such as opening up access to hotel rooms and things, which has, really changed the landscape for referrals to shelters. Some women were understandably nervous about coming to what was potentially a collective living environment, even though we have had, absolutely bulletproof policies and procedures for, prevention, isolation and even quarantine if necessary. We had all that done really early in the pandemic. But what we've seen is, originally, just before the lockdown started, we had about a 30% increase in phone calls of people saying, I just need to know that things may get bad. Will there be a safe place for me if I need one? And so it was kind of the phone call before the ask, if that makes sense. And then things went quiet for a couple of weeks. Then after the Easter long weekend, we saw again a little bit of a move upwards in a request, which is really common. It's often after long weekends or the long school holidays that we do see a spike in referrals. And that's about people, kind of being around each other much more often, or that those more close opportunities for the power and control to be exerted. And referrals feel like they're starting to pick up again now. And look, at the moment, I'm really concerned about what we're going to see towards the end of the year. And that's because of a few of the government policy settings. Women have been allowed to access up to $10,000 of superannuation in this financial year, and we'll be allowed to do so again in next financial year. Job seeker allowance has been doubled, and there's been more properties back on the market because there's been nothing, like Airbnb market has essentially collapsed, and I think a lot of landlords are looking for that longer term security. So I'm really concerned a lot of women have actually locked themselves into rentals that when the money runs out or job seeker gets cut will be unaffordable towards the end of the year and early next year. So we've possibly just kicked the can down the road on that stuff, or people are making do with an interim option. I am also concerned about domestic and family violence going up. While the police statistics told us one thing, which said that it was relatively stable, we know that police reports are only the tip of the iceberg. So my estimate is that we will see a gradual rise in women asking for help over the next few months.
So apart from the shelter network, WCS has also been involved in the last 12 months in some really exciting initiatives. So I'll talk a little bit about a couple of those. One that I was personally very moved by, because it is in my local area, was the wonderful Beecroft House, where 20 women over 55 have now been given their own little space, their own little safe space in the world. And as you can see in the images here that we're sharing, each woman has received their own little bedroom and their own little sitting area, as well as some beautiful collective kitchens and big sort of shared spaces. Beecroft House is a really interesting one because it's such a great example, I think, of innovation and cooperation. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, and so I think it was 2018 we were approached by a consultant who was working with Twilight Aged Care, who actually owned the facility. And Jamison House, as it was then known, was an aged care facility that's going to be redeveloped at some point in the future, but it was likely to stand unoccupied for 2 to 3 years. And so they came to us with a proposal of, using it for housing for that period. And so, and full credit to my Chief Operating Officer, Simone Parsons, who really championed and led this project and stitched together all of the partnerships. It was brilliantly done. And so essentially it was a partnership between Women's Community Shelters, Twilight Aged Care, Link Housing, who are the community housing provider that managed the tenancies for each of the women who are in there, National Projects and Maintenance, who are a partner of WCS, who did, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of renovations pro bono to make it so beautiful, and Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Women's Shelter, who provide the outreach support to the women who are there. Fantastic. And so, it's a multi-partner arrangement. But what it does is this provides that secure, beautiful housing for a couple of years. And the really important thing for me was that we didn't want to be in a situation where we said, after that period of time, right, well, you're homeless again now, what happens next? We've actually got a panel of community housing providers who've made a commitment to provide permanent housing for women after that time. And for me, that really embedded it as a yes project. And I think, we're looking to replicate that again in partnership with Twilight House. And I think the work that we've done and the innovation there is a real model for how these things can also be self-supporting as well. We just looked at some figures and it's actually, it's more than broken even. It's actually brought some money in. And I think, this virtuous circle of tenancy management at low cost, women contributing the rent that they can afford, which pays for the support worker that we do, leveraging pro bono support to make the place beautiful. It's a very viable way of providing housing for women.
Yeah, and otherwise they're sitting there vacant. I mean,
exactly. There's so many vacant properties in the planning cycle that we can use.
That must kill you.
It does. It does. I just want to
take them all.
Well, the thing that the equation that I can't do in my head is that, there's Everybody's Home is the Homelessness Australia, Homelessness New South Wales national campaign that says we need 500,000 social houses to meet the need over the next decade. And, and on Census Night 2016, there were 1.13 million unoccupied properties.
No.
And so you think, my goodness, everybody in community, I just want everybody on the lookout to go, okay, that's been underutilised for like 3 years. What can we do with it? And to provide these clever solutions.
And how much better, too, to have those properties lived in, loved, nurtured, the gardens maintained, than having them sit there derelict.
Yeah, exactly.
It just makes some sense on so many levels. The other initiative you've been involved in is my favourite initiative, and that is Walk the Talk, our youth education program, where we train high school students and give them some great understandings about respectful relationships and their capacity as change makers. And we really help them unpack the gendered nature of violence. And then they walk the talk on all of that and partner with their local shelter. Now, I know why I love Walk the Talk for a million reasons, but why were you, as CEO of WCS, so keen to introduce this education element into your overall plan?
Well, it's actually really simple, and that's because I really hope to be out of a job one day.
Yeah.
It's about that. I think while we started in the business of providing crisis accommodation for women, ultimately we want an Australia where shelters don't have to exist because we've solved domestic and family violence. And again, this grew out of working at that local community level, seeing the engagement, of schools and of community groups, and thinking, well, this is really that platform for teaching people. If we can get into the schools and the youth and again, take that issue down from being the big scary thing that they feel, guilty or uncomfortable about, and give them something that they can do to make a concrete and positive difference. You've not just educated them, you've shown them, and they've made a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm passionate about. It's about, I've always been like, why do just the one thing when you can do 2 or 3? And it serves multiple purposes. And so for me, Walk the Talk is not just about the education component, it's about the support for the shelters, it's about that virtuous circle and the service learning, and and the
generational change.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
These young people are going
Yeah.
to have such different attitudes around family and domestic violence, and really understand that there are support services that exist that aren't scary, that are non-judgmental.
Yeah, and that it happens in their community
Yes.
as well. That this is not some issue that happens kind of over there where those poor people are nasty and hit each other. Do you know what I mean? This happens in every community, and communities can respond and make a positive difference. And you're never too young to do that either. That you can start caring about the community around you from a young age and making a difference.
And developing that feeling of power again over an issue that can so often make kids feel powerless.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the housing outcomes for 2019. Again, some pretty impressive statistics. Talk us through what we're looking at here and what the reality of that means.
Well, what that means is that our shelter staff are absolute magic. They
rock stars,
total rock stars. They managed to find housing out of nowhere, and I think for me that really tells a good measure of success. I think the variances talk a little bit about affordability, in various areas of Sydney, but overall super positive outcomes, and it says that we're advocating for our clients really effectively with community housing providers, with real estate agents, with other services, and we're building things out just right so that women do have a pathway out of the shelters, because the advocacy part is really important. I mean, if I think about Great Lakes, for example, we've had Aboriginal women there who've been knocked back from 60 places that they've tried to rent because of systemic racism and issues like that. And where you've got somebody who's really skilled at advocacy, who will back somebody in, who says, we're providing ongoing support, this is what we're doing, and advocate so strongly for that woman, that's why we get the outcomes, because, our shelter staff are there to speak on our clients' behalf and support them in that way. And, I'm super proud of those outcomes.
Yeah, amazing. And I just thought it would be also interesting to look a little bit at this sort of social franchise model that you've got, and to ask you, if I was a corporate watching this, or perhaps if your annual report had crossed my desk, what would be your message about why this is the model they should be backing, Annabelle?
Oh, well, my message would be that for every dollar you invest in us, we draw three in from other sources. And so really what that means is their dollar goes a lot further. For every dollar donation that comes to us in cash, we draw three in from other sources, and that might be from community fundraising, it might be up against government contributions or against in-kind support. And so really what that is about really effective use of money, and not just it not just going to one place, but to be able to go to a number of different channels. And I think what we are doing is we are empowering and developing skills within communities that remain there. It's embedded for good. A lot of people who might participate on our boards or as part of shelters, it might be their first board appointment, but then they will go on to other community initiatives and support other good endeavours as a result of that journey that they've been on with us. And so, for me, it is that capacity building element that makes us compelling to be involved in. And also it's an excellent corporate social responsibility thing to do, to support women and to support women experiencing domestic and family violence, because there's also research that very clearly tells us that investment in women generates a 60% return for communities.
Pretty compelling stuff. I'm just going to move out of the sharing mode and go back to visualize. Oh, look, we're right on time as well. Thank you so much for talking us through this report. I'm so proud of it and so proud of being a part of the WCS family. It's certainly, I started with WCS as a volunteer board member, helping contribute to founding the sanctuary. Now I get to work with you and run this amazing education program. But there isn't, what so impresses me about it is that we are really creative, we're innovative, we're looking at ways in which we can collaborate, we're looking at ways in which we can shut our doors ultimately. It's dynamic. And, so much of that is thanks to you, Annabelle, and your dynamism and passion.
Look, WCS is a team effort. I've been enormously lucky and privileged to head this organisation, especially in those early days. It was a heck of a lot of work, like super hard work, and it always is. But this is a team effort, and one of one of my principles and one of the things that I'm so grateful for is to surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than me, that know a lot more stuff than I do, and to just let them go and do clever things. And I think for me, the interchange in what we get between what we show the shelters and what they give back to us, you know, what we learn at the hub too from what our communities do and from their expertise, just grows the whole endeavour that much more. You know, this is a team effort. I think of it a bit like, you know, the plaited threads forming a really strong rope. You know, there's so many stories interwoven with us now. And I just feel we're growing stronger as a network year on year.
Now, I'm going to include at the end a link so that you can download and read the full 2020 annual report. And I'd really encourage you to do that because it's absolutely outstanding. And a credit to the whole WCS team. And I know some of them are watching and have joined us today. So thank you for that as well. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much, Annabelle.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.